Hello guys, how are you?
I'm Hardeep Singh. Welcome back to your own YouTube channel. IELTS updates and recent exams. For more updates related to recent IELTS exam writing test topics, listening, reading, practice test, and speaking, you can guesswork. Please, guys, participate in everyday listening and reading practice test to achieve your desired band score in your actual IELTS exam. Please hit the like and subscribe button. Press the bell icon for the upcoming notifications. Don't forget like, subscribe and share my YouTube channel and my Facebook page, IELTS updates and recent exams.
Part 1.
You will hear a man and a woman talking about who they would like as their flatmates. You have 30 seconds to read questions 1 to 5.
Okay, Alex, let's make a decision now. I've got to head off to my parents' place for the weekend, and we'll need our 2 new flatmates to move in soon. Who do we have again?
Mauro, Spring, Katia, Lucy, and that lovely girl from Turkey. What was her name?
Aziza. I think she's my first choice. She seemed very mature.
She did, didn't she?
She also said she'd shared a house in Istanbul for 2 years before she came here, so she knows what flatting is all about.
That's true. While you were on the phone, I had a talk to her about her part-time job as a telephone counselor for the Turkish community. It sounds quite steady and well enough paid, so she won't have any problems with the rent, unlike our old flatmate, Tina.
Who would you choose next?
How about a guy?
I don't know. Neither of them was that impressive. I mean, Mauro from Mexico was a party animal. Remember, he only found our place because he knew there was a certain nightclub nearby. And Spring seemed spoilt to me. He told me that his father in Hong Kong paid all his parking and speeding fines, and he ate out at restaurants almost every night. I doubt he's got any idea how to cook.
That leaves us with Katia and Lucy then. And I found Katia rather shy. We hardly know anything about her.
I think she's the strong, silent type. But while you were showing Mauro around, I had a chat to her. She's in her 3rd year of environmental engineering.
Really? She's going to be an engineer?
Yes. In fact, she won a prize at university last year for a model she made.
That does sound interesting. But what about Mauro? We could do with someone social. I'm sure he'd be keen on our Sunday get-togethers. He promised me he knew how to barbecue. Plus, he's working as a security guard at night, so he'll be around during the day. It's not a bad idea having someone in the flat while we're all out.
I don't know. If he works night shift, he might sleep during the day. This year, I'll need to practice the piano here in the mornings for my performance course. It's likely my music would disturb him.
That's a fair point.
Before you listen to the rest of the conversation, you have 30 seconds to read questions 6 to 10.
What's wrong with 3 women living here, Alex? I think Katia would be fine. She won't be so shy once she gets to know us.
You know, Julie, I can't give a rational explanation for why I didn't take to Katia. I just prefer someone else. Why don't we reconsider Lucy? I know you were annoyed because she came an hour late, but I rather liked her.
She's doing a master's in public health, isn't she?
Yes, I think she's quite a serious person, And since she's been a nurse, you'd hope she'd be clean.
Yes, you would. Didn't Lucy mention she had a boyfriend?
I don't think so.
I don't want anyone with a boyfriend. Remember Tina?
How could I ever forget her? She really did have us wrapped around her little finger.
She certainly did. I'm so glad she's gone. Yes, Lucy seemed nice and normal, and she'd probably get on with Aziza. I think they're the same age.
I've just had a thought. We need to choose 3 people. Someone we like may have found another place. I love our flat, but it's some distance from the city and not everyone likes an old building.
So who should we have?
How about Aziza and Lucy and Mauro as reserve?
I agree with your top 2, but I think Katia should be backup.
I'll call Aziza and Lucy. And if one of them has made another commitment, we'll think again.
That is the end of part 1.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 2.
You will hear a woman giving part of a workshop on garden design. Before you listen, you have 30 seconds to read questions 11 to 14.
Welcome back to the workshop. In this part, we're going to look at making a veranda garden. These days, few people can afford to live in a house with a garden, but we can all create a tranquil space on a balcony or veranda. It has long been my belief that a veranda garden softens the sharp lines of the urban environment. Greenery, blossom, and fruit, which attract birds and insects, bring us closer to nature. If well designed, its mood changes with each season, and it may reflect Japanese spiritual traditions that help us feel at peace. Of course, everyone's needs are different. Perhaps you'd like more privacy, or to conceal an unsightly building next door. Perhaps there's too much glare from the setting sun. In these instances, fast-growing plants in strategic places will be your main ambition. One client of mine, whose husband was blind, chose scented plants for their veranda garden. He sat out there every night, delighting in the fragrances. Another client of mine opted for an area of raked gravel, with one large ornamental rock reminiscent of a famous temple garden in Kyoto. From a more practical perspective, a low-maintenance veranda garden will increase the value of your property. You may be surprised to know that around the world there's a movement in big cities for roof, terrace and veranda gardens, so buyers won't be put off by your creativity at all. But on to our design. I'm assuming your veranda is about 1.8 meters deep and 4.5 meters wide. If it's larger than this, all the better. If it's smaller, you'll need to plan more carefully, foregoing some features. It doesn't matter which floor of the building you're on, but if you've got a view, you might consider how tall particular plants grow. The handout I've given you details a range of plant characteristics. For example, a loquat tree grows to 6 meters, but an azalea bush only reaches 3. Loquats bear fruit as well, which you might like to eat, or you might find a chore to pick up and dispose of. In my design, I've chosen a Japanese maple as the centerpiece, since I love the way its foliage changes color in autumn. In a large pot, a maple will grow to about 4 meters. The garden design I'm going to show you is quite high maintenance at the start. I'd say you'd have to spend 3 hours a week tending it. But after a year or so, it virtually takes care of itself.
Before you listen to the rest of the talk, you have 30 seconds to read questions 15 to 20.
So, let's get started. Your veranda probably has a concrete floor and a low brick or concrete wall around it. It's more than likely you've got a drain in the top right corner. The floor of the veranda garden is the first priority. In my design, I've chosen 4 different surfaces to create a sense of space, and because they react in different ways to light and rain. In a small area, you want to maximize texture. I've chosen practical square concrete pavers for the area under the table and chairs, and elsewhere large irregular stones sourced from a river, and small round stones not much bigger than pebbles. There's also an area of sand which is marked with the letter H in your diagram. You'll find this might be popular with your pet if you have one. After laying the floor, most people construct a wooden or aluminium frame over the concrete wall. Onto this, bamboo is attached for plants to climb up. In front of the bamboo, wooden planters or boxes may be positioned. The choice of plants in these is up to you. But again, think about height, shape, loss of leaves, fruit, scent, and cost. Although maples are expensive, they're beautiful, and I've put one in the centre. After you've planted, you'll probably want to buy a really nice set of outdoor furniture. Stackable plastic chairs are a no-no, as in my view, they're part of the ugly, mass-produced culture we're trying to escape. I also discourage people from putting a barbecue on their veranda because they're so seldom used, and they take up such a lot of space. Some people do add features like a small pond or bird bath or a stone lantern to their newly landscaped area. So, happy designing! Any questions?
That is the end of part 2.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 3.
You will hear an interview with a soil scientist about home composting.
First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 25.
Good evening. Tonight we're taking a look at home composting, and here to tell us all about it we have in the studio Dr. Marianne Rothenberg, a soil scientist from the Institute of Environmental Integrity. Good evening, Dr. Rothenberg.
Good evening.
Tell me, why is home composting such a hot topic at the moment?
Well, we need to recycle more of our domestic waste because we are rapidly running out of landfill space. But primarily it's to cut down on harmful greenhouse gases emitted from landfill sites. Also, compost is the natural way to improve the fertility of the soil for people interested in growing their own food or organic gardening in general.
Yes, I think most people understand the benefits of compost for the soil and also the landfill problem, But aren't greenhouse gases produced just the same when waste is left to decay in the garden?
This is a common misconception. When waste is properly composted at home, it generates far less greenhouse gases than it would in a landfill site. There's also the vehicle pollution to consider when waste from millions of homes has to be transported to these sites.
I realise that, but can you explain how home composting is preferable to decomposition in landfill?
Well, composting is a biological process that requires favourable conditions for microorganisms, mostly bacteria, to survive and multiply. That means sufficient oxygen, moisture, warmth, and the correct acidic base balance. It's also important to use the correct blend of organic materials and to agitate the compost to allow the air to circulate. This does not happen in landfill.
Yes, many people are unsure as to exactly what is meant by organic materials and what they can and cannot compost. Can you give examples, please?
Well, organic means containing carbon, but in composting terms it refers to anything that was at one time living. It can be divided into green material and brown material. The greens are kitchen scraps such as vegetable, salad and fruit waste, old flowers and grass cuttings. These are a good nitrogen source. The browns include things like leaves, crushed eggshells, egg boxes, twigs and small branches, and shredded cardboard or paper, which provide the carbon.
And do these brown and greens need to be mixed together?
Normally it's more of a layering process. Each layer of greens, that's food waste, is covered by a layer of browns, for example leaves.
Right, and are there any food substances that won't compost?
Yes, most definitely. Don't add meat, fish, bones, dairy products, or any kind of cooking oil because these are not very biodegradable and will slow the composting process down.
Fine, I get the general idea. Thank you, that was most illuminating.
Before you hear the rest of the interview, you have some time to read questions
26 to 30.
One of our listeners would like to know more about the practical aspects of home composting. Can you say more about this, please?
Yes, certainly. There's more than one method of composting, but a popular way is to use a ready-built wooden frame or a plastic composting bin, made from recycled plastic, of course. It can be sited anywhere in the garden or placed near to the house for convenience if you wish. Ideally, it should have a trapdoor at the bottom to access the finished compost. The process takes about 6 to 9 months.
That's quite long, isn't it?
Yes, so it's often a good idea to have 2 composters, with one full that can continue the process whilst you start the other bin. And the one thing, it's best to keep the kitchen scraps in a small plastic container with a sealed lid. An old ice cream carton is suitable.
And how about the garden waste? Is that kept outside in another container?
Yes, but it doesn't need to be a container with a lid. Nothing sophisticated. Any enclosure in the garden will do. Just somewhere to keep leaves, really. Start with a layer of these at the bottom, and then add a layer of kitchen scraps on a daily basis, topped off with another layer of leaves and twigs, and so on, in roughly equal measures.
Now, I know some people have concerns about attracting rodents and family pets. Is this really a problem?
Well, it can be, but it's less so if your bin has a lid or the kitchen scraps are well covered with leaves and twigs.
And what if there are not enough leaves in your garden?
Crunched up newspaper and shredded card can provide an alternative source of carbon, and they also increase the aeration of the compost.
Well, thank you once again, Doctor.
That is the end of part 3.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 4.
You will hear an undergraduate tutor talking about academic essays and referencing.
First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40.
Good morning. I'm Dr. Mike Roberts, one of the Institute's undergraduate tutors. I'm going to talk briefly about the correct way to set out an academic essay and also how to reference it. More details on submitting your essay and how to reference academic work generally, including research papers, can be found in the College Handbook. That's the Red Book. You should all have a copy. These guidelines, or rules really, must be adhered to if you want to avoid losing marks. 5% of the total mark is available for correct referencing, which could mean the difference between a pass and a fail. OK, let's start with the page setup. The margins should be 1 inch, each side with 1 1/4 inches at the top and bottom. Now, these are automatically chosen to suit the printer, so there's no need to alter the normal template. The text must be double-spaced to enable the tutor to add comments either above or below the text, and also to facilitate reading. Choose a 12-point Times New Roman font for your essay. It must be typed and justified. Nothing is to be handwritten. OK? Don't indent the paragraphs and don't add additional blank lines between the paragraphs. It makes the essay look longer than it really is, but this will not fool the examiner. Now, your essay will be marked and assessed anonymously to avoid any discrimination. So make sure your candidate number appears in the right-hand corner of every page in the top margin, the header. But your name must not appear anywhere on the final essay. Right, any questions so far? All this is in your handbook, by the way. I'll just mention the word count. To avoid being penalised, don't exceed the word count by more than 10%. So a 3,000-word essay shouldn't overrun by more than 300 words. Or, to put it another way, a 3,000-word essay should not be any longer than 3,300 words. If you write any more words than this, the examiner will not be obliged to read them. Don't write anything less than 3,000 words though, OK? Right, I'd like to move on to referencing. Well, why do we need to do it? Does anybody know? Firstly, citing references in an essay lends support to your own idea and arguments. It's important to substantiate them. Secondly, in academic research, correct referencing enables other researchers to locate the source of the material so that they can study it and check it. Finally, by acknowledging who wrote the work, you cannot be accused of taking another author's ideas as being your own, which is plagiarism. Now, some people might argue that there are no original ideas out there, that whatever you write, somebody else will already have written, in which case you would end up having to reference all your written work. This is not true. You do not have to reference facts that are well established and in the public domain. So, for example, you can safely state that Sigmund Freud was the founder of psychiatry without having to reference it because it's a widely accepted fact. But what you cannot do is state that Freud was the first person to study the dreams of childhood without quoting the relevant text. OK, I hope I've made that clear enough. We use the Harvard system of referencing here. It's an author-date system, so in the body of the essay you would write in parenthesis the author's surname without the first name, followed by a comma, followed by the date of the source. For example, Freud was the first person to study childhood dreams, open brackets. Freud, comma, 1906, close brackets. OK? When compiling your reference list, it should be placed in alphabetical order with the author's surname, initial, followed by the year of publication in brackets, then the title, which should be underlined, and finally the city where the book was published along with the publisher's name. For example, Freud, S. 1920, A General Introduction to Psychoanalysis, New York, Bonnie, and Liveright. OK, that's it. Please refer to your Red Book for more details.
That is the end of part 4.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
So guys, don't forget like, subscribe and share my YouTube channel and my Facebook page. IELTS updates and recent exams. For more updates related to recent IELTS exam writing test topics, listening, reading, practice test, and speaking, you got guesswork. Please guys participate in everyday new IELTS listening and reading practice tests to achieve your desired band score in your actual IELTS exam. For more IELTS material, visit my official website www.ieltsupdatesandrecentexams.com. The link is given below in the description. If you need PDF files of latest IELTS material, then please join my Telegram channel. So guys, please write your score below the comment section. Again, thanks for listening. God bless you all guys. Stay tuned, stay safe.